From censored files to clear evidence, this is Redacted Realms.
The painful memory of the 1988 Johnson South Reef incident in Vietnam. China has occupied the Cross and may expand to the reefs, shoals, East Reef, South Reef, and Subi Reef. Our Senkaku Islands are being occupied and controlled, establishing a foothold to dominate and seize sovereignty over the Diaoyu Islands. Therefore, we must maintain a high level of combat readiness while urgently occupying and holding the reefs, preventing them from carrying out their intentions. That is what happened on February 4, 1988. Later, on March 14, 1988, the conflict took place in the Gac Ma shoal area, Ho Lent, Lena and the Trong Sa archipelago, resulted in a heroic sacrifice of 64 naval officers and soldiers while they were performing their duty to protect the sovereignty of the fatherland. So what exactly happened? Let us go together. Let us quietly look back on this painful memory so as to never forget the brave people did not spare their blood to protect this fatherland. Before the war broke out, in the early months of 1988, this is the first time China has had troops to occupy Vietnam. On January 31st, China occupied Cross Reef, and on February 18, occupied Fiery Cross Reef. By February 26th, China had occupied Dao Hien Reef. By February 28th, China had occupied Subi Reef. Regarding the Vietnamese Navy, Vietnam also invaded Tien New Reef on January 26th. Da Nang on February 5th, Da Long on February 6th, Da Dong on February 18th, Da Kok Can on February 27th, and Nobilis Stone on March 2nd. Fortunately, our military promptly prevented the invasion attempts. The increasingly widespread expansion from the after observational analysis, our forces have identified the total number of islands in the Spratly, Gac Ma, Ho Len, and Lena are islands that hold the most crucial positions. And if occupied, China would completely have the capability can capture the remaining bases. Therefore, we have determined to hold these 3 islands. And the 1 to 2 year transport brigade was ordered to deploy combat forces for this mission. On the morning of March 14, 1988, the main battle officially took place at Gac Ma, Ho Lin, and Lena. The disparity in national power between Vietnam and China is evident. And to be honest, just a glance makes it feel like a world of difference. At that time, China already possessed long-range weapons, and when reaching the maximum level, can be up to several hundred meters. They had 2 transport ships, 3 specialized destroyers equipped with 100mm guns and anti-submarine rocket launch, 37mm flare gun, 14.5mm heavy machine gun, and anti-ship missiles. Vietnam is equipped, but the firing range is only a few hundred meters. We only have 3 unarmed or poorly armed transport ships. Personal weapons are limited to AK-47s, 12.7mm machine guns, and B-40s equipped for the crew. From such an overall perspective, it can be easily predicted that once one sets a foot into this war, we have determined that there will be a significant loss, and it is also possible that we will gain nothing from trying to recover from the failure. Chinese ships can fire from a distance of Vietnamese ships without being hit by return fire. And we cannot attack Chinese ships, we can only use personal weapons to shoot down landing forces to prevent China from deploying troops to occupy. However, it truly does not do justice to the will of the Vietnamese Navy, which continues to fight on, even though the force faces such a great struggle. 6 a.m. on March 14, 1988. Our troops were on a mission to plant and hold the flag on Gac Ma Island. Unexpectedly, 4 Chinese destroyers and missile frigates advanced. Then a Chinese ship aimed its guns at the boat and threatened it. But Vietnamese engineers continued to work normally, suspending boats and transporting construction materials out to the island. As for the protection team, they are tasked with guard duty. It is known that nothing could shake these brave individuals. At 6:30, Chinese ships deployed armed troop carriers, landing on the island, then encircling in an offensive-defensive formation, moving along the coral reef. The 2 sides were only about 1 meter apart. Seeing this, the Vietnamese Navy tightened their defense, forming a circle around the flag of Vietnam. The situation was quite tense as they were on a construction mission, so they only had 2 AK-47s. Nearly 40 soldiers from ship HQ 604 came ashore to support their comrades, bringing only tools like crowbars. However, it is truly admirable that these indomitable spirits still try to protect the flag against Chinese soldiers. Initially, the two sides grappled with each other barehanded, then realized they couldn't continue like that forever. There, a Chinese officer drew a pistol and fired warning shots, but it had no effect. At this point, the enemy decided to take stronger action. Chinese soldiers began firing towards our troops, causing Trong Wai Tran and Phuong to die on the spot. Before dying, the soldier courageously shouted, preferring to sacrifice rather than lose the island, let his blood stain the traditional flag of the naval forces. After that, Chinese officers continued using bayonets to stab and fired shots, injuring Corporal Nguyen Bat Lan. In a prolonged struggle, the Vietnamese army still refused to withdraw from the rocky island. The group of Chinese soldiers on the island were then forced to retreat, then opened fire from warships O2 and 31, shooting at HQ 604 and Vietnamese soldiers on the island. After a fierce barrage, almost all Vietnamese soldiers on the island had sacrificed their lives. After that, Chinese ships turned to fire at HQ 505, near Kulin Island and HQ 605 near Landau Island. After using force and artillery fire, the Chinese Navy again deployed smoke and landed towards HQ 604. The captain at the time, Vu Phai Tru, commanded the remaining troops on the ship, fiercely fighting back with weapons like AK-47s, RPGs, V-40s, V-41s. Finally forcing the enemy to abandon the smoke, jump into the sea, and flee back to their ship. The battle continued to unfold. A series of Chinese artillery shells kept being fired, until HQ 604 gradually sank along with the Vietnamese sailors who sacrificed. Realizing nothing more could be done, as dawn broke, the Chinese forces decided to withdraw from Gac Ma reef. 2 hours after the battle at Gac Ma, precisely at 5 a.m. on March 14, Captain Vu Voi had 3 groups of soldiers to swim to Co Lin Reef, planting the Vietnamese flag at Ba Ga. 3 hours later, 2 Chinese destroyers continuously shelled HQ 505, causing HQ 505 to catch fire, its hull breached, water flooding compartments, oil spilling across the sea surface. However, it is saddening that what Vietnam had at the time were only V-40s. Unable to reach the Chinese ships, HQ 505 soon tilted and was at risk of sinking. Vu Voi, the captain, consulted with the ship's command, and was determined to repair it at all costs to reach the ship on the island. 18 minutes later, through all the efforts of our troops, HQ 505 managed to reach 2/3 of its hull on the reef. Realizing the situation could no longer be helped, he also ordered all movable weapons to be transferred to the island in preparation for combat. Simultaneously quickly destroy the assets at 9 o'clock. Chinese ships are attacking more aggressively. HQ 505 artillery caused the oil depot to catch fire, making it impossible. Despite being completely at a disadvantage, and if this situation continues, our troops may have to sacrifice everything. But the naval soldiers were determined to hold their ground to the end. China continued its artillery fire, lasting for a full 30 minutes like that. Only then did it stop completely. The captain arrived at the ceremony at this moment, looking for Gac Ma, who was not. I saw a floating ammunition crate and many of our soldiers holding onto floating objects together. He urgently ordered the rubber chests on the starboard side of the ship. Then, they dispatched a squad to run to Gac Ma for reinforcements. HQ 605 then proceeded to Landau Reef around 5 a.m. on March 14. Captain Le Len's son, just as he had anchored the ship to position it, immediately ordered a team of soldiers to carry out the mission of planting a sovereignty marker on this bird island. Just about 20 minutes after the combat team of HQ 605 planted the sovereignty marker on the shoal, China's missile frigate 502 approached at an extremely close distance, only 500 to 700 meters, and the artillery fire shift, then continuously used loudspeakers to threaten, forcing the Vietnamese ship. The soldiers at sea, facing those pressures, did not falter and instead raised their voices. This is Vietnam's sovereignty, demanding the Chinese vessel to withdraw immediately. Knowing that whether using force or words, nothing could be done with the Vietnamese soldiers. At this moment, China directed all its firepower at our troops' ships, then gradually moved out of the range of the infantry weapons of ship HQ 605 and prepared to disengage. At the same time, even more dangerous were the Chinese warships. After sinking the ship HQ 604, attack also began to extend to attack ship HQ 605. Captain HQ 605 is now starting the engine, preparing to climb onto the Landau. China's missile frigate 556 immediately launched a frenzied bombardment. The first shell aimed at the bridge killed the guard soldier Bui Diheen, died on the spot. Captain Leland's son suffered burns to his face and had shrapnel deeply embedded in his. Captain Leland's son gave the order, held the anchor, and ran the ship aground at land. Although everyone was seriously injured, none of them were alive. Until the HQ 605 ship was paralyzed, could no longer be controlled, and burst into fierce flood. Then everyone began to leave the ship, swinging to Landau Beach to break away, because they understood that if they stayed with the ship, then everything will be sacrificed, and the sovereignty of Landau Island will also be difficult. However, in the end, at 8:20 on March 14th, seizing the opportunity at this moment, China has landed and occupied. It is truly sad that we could not do anything more at that time. The outcome after the battle, the courageous actions of Captain Bu Huila, and the crew of ship HQ 505 managed to retain this county lands. China occupied Gac Ma Reef on March 16, 1988 and has maintained control to this day. Later, we were determined to reclaim the border islands, but could only plant a flag on Landau Island. At Gac Ma, China has rapidly built houses and installed power grids around the island, so the soldiers could not approach. Even so, the land we managed to reclaim. We continue to build fortifications and maintain strong defenses to this day. Thus, it can be seen that throughout the process of nation building and defense, countless brave individuals have sacrificed themselves. Despite the imbalance of forces and weaponry in the battlefield, the island and sea soldiers did not hesitate to sacrifice their youth to protect the homeland, which is truly admirable. What do you think of this conflict? Can we do more? And do you think in the future, will China continue similar actions regarding our islands and seas? Please leave your thoughts in the comments below so they can know. Thank you for listening. Goodbye and see you again. Subscribe to Redacted Realms channel to watch the latest videos.
If this file opened your eyes, subscribe and open the next case.